If someone had told me a few years ago that I'd end up owning the land under a suburban HOA that tried to force me off my own ranch, I'd have laughed, tipped my hat, and told them to stop day drinking. But here we are, and not only do I still live on my ranch, I collect rent from the very folks who once threatened to evict me. Let me tell you how it all went down. I'm Jack Wallace. My family's owned Clearwater Ranch since 1902. It's about 300 acres of rolling grassland, nestled at the foot of the Sierra foothills. Generations of Wallaces ran cattle, raised horses, and lived a good life out here. My granddad always said, "They ain't making land like this anymore, so hold on to it." And I did. Even as the nearby city of Northgate expanded, swallowing fields with shopping malls and gated communities, I held firm. My land was sacred, a buffer from the madness. Developers offered me millions. I turned them all down. I didn't want concrete where cows grazed, but the world didn't stop spinning. 5 years ago, Northgate annexed the county land just west of my property. A massive development called Oak Springs sprouted like weeds. The HOA came with it. Rows of identical homes, perfectly mowed lawns, and the smell of entitlement in the air. They didn't like me much. The trouble started small. A few neighbors complained about the smell of manure. Then came noise complaints when I hosted our annual rodeo. When I refused to stop running tractors early in the morning, they started sending me letters, official-looking ones with HOA letterheads, demanding I follow their neighborhood noise ordinances. I ignored them. I wasn't part of their neighborhood. Their roads ended at my fence line, but they kept escalating. One day I came home to find a sign posted on my gate. Notice, this property is in violation of Oak Springs HOA aesthetic guidelines. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my horse. I tore it down and lit it in a bonfire. That's when they played their trump card. A few weeks later, I was visited by two representatives from the Oak Springs HOA board. They came dressed like realtors. Suits, clipboards, fake smiles. One was a woman named Carol Simmons. The other was a guy named Trevor Chase. Both were as smug as they come. "Mr. Wallace," Carol began, "we'd like to make you a very generous offer for Clearwater Ranch. The community feels your land would be better utilized as part of our expansion." "The community?" I asked. "You mean you and your clipboard?" Trevor smirked. "You'll find the offer more than fair." I looked at the number. 4 million. To some, that's a dream. To me, it was an insult. My land was worth twice that, but more importantly, it wasn't for sale. "Not interested," I said, handing the paper back. Carol raised an eyebrow. "You understand, if you refuse, we'll begin the process of filing a complaint with the city." "You go right ahead," I said, tipping my hat. "And while you're at it, make sure your complaint doesn't get lost on my land." They didn't get it. Not yet. After they left, I pulled out my deed. Something about their confidence bothered me. So I drove down to the county records office. I wanted to look into the Oak Springs development. Turns out, about 20 years ago, before Oak Springs was ever dreamed up, a small development company bought a 100-acre parcel that had once been part of my great-uncle's estate. He'd sold it off when he moved to Oregon. But here's the kicker. The deed didn't include mineral or water rights. In fact, it specified something else. The development was built on leased land. My great-uncle had only sold surface rights for 99 years. Ownership had quietly transferred through various banks and holding companies until it ended up in a trust. And guess who inherited that trust 3 years ago when Aunt May passed? That's right, me. I didn't say anything right away. I let them keep sending their letters. Meanwhile, I hired a real estate attorney to confirm what I suspected. Oak Springs HOA did not own the land their homes were built on. They owned the houses, but not the ground underneath. Every home in that subdivision sat on leased land, which meant I, as the landowner, could technically renegotiate terms, or even choose not to renew the lease when the time came. Even better, the original lease agreement allowed for lease adjustments every 10 years, and the 10-year mark was coming up. I sent a certified letter to the HOA. In it, I introduced myself not as Jack Wallace, the cranky rancher next door, but as the managing trustee of Clearwater Holdings, the entity that owned the land beneath Oak Springs. I explained that due to inflation, resource strain, and increased property values, lease rates would be adjusted. The new lease fee, $1,000 per home per month. You could hear the collective screech of entitled outrage echoing across the valley. They called emergency meetings. I was called a scammer, a liar, and worse. Their lawyer sent me a strongly worded letter. My lawyer responded with 150 pages of documentation. They tried to sue me. Big mistake. In court, my documents held up. The judge acknowledged the lease terms, the transfer of rights, and the fact that the HOA had failed to read their own foundational agreements. Their original developer had long since gone bankrupt, and no one in the HOA had thought to check land ownership. The lawsuit was dismissed. Then came the real kicker. I offered them a deal, reduce the lease to $750 month per home, if they formally apologized and dropped all future complaints about my ranch. Some resisted, others caved. Eventually they voted, it passed. The HOA board resigned in disgrace. A new board was elected, one that was much more neighborly. Carol and Trevor moved away within a year. The new HOA president, a retired firefighter named Sam, stopped by with a pie and a six-pack and thanked me for being patient. I told him no hard feelings. Now Oak Springs pays its lease on time every month. Part of that money goes into a scholarship fund for rural students. Another part funds local conservation efforts. I even let them use one of my fields for their annual summer festival. For a fee. One interesting twist came months later. A journalist researching the whole debacle dug into the original developer's dealings. Turns out the guy had cut corners on everything, failing to disclose lease agreements, selling homes without clarifying land ownership, and mismanaging HOA funds before disappearing overseas. The HOA tried to locate him for restitution. No luck. I considered going public with my own story, but in the end, I figured the situation spoke for itself. The folks who tried to run me out had built their kingdom on sand, and I owned the sand. That summer I hosted a barbecue. I invited the entire Oak Springs community. Some were skeptical, others brought potato salad. It was a hit. We had live music, smoked brisket, games for the kids. Even the biggest complainers cracked a smile. By sunset, folks were shaking my hand and laughing about the past. Sam gave a little speech. We learned a tough lesson about assumptions, but thanks to Jack, we get to be neighbors instead of enemies. People clapped. I raised my beer and tipped my hat. People think land is just dirt and grass, but it's more than that. It's history. It's family. It's the right to wake up and not be told how high your grass can grow. The HOA tried to force me out. Turns out they were squatting on my property all along. I don't rub it in their faces, much. But every now and then, I stroll through Oak Springs, tip my hat to the homeowners, and enjoy the irony. Some wave, some glare. But every last one of them pays their rent. And that, my friends, is what we call poetic justice.